Cool. SharePoint. What is SharePoint? Very, very briefly. Microsoft SharePoint is a web application platform that was developed by Microsoft, obviously. It's designed as a central platform for common enterprise web requirements. SharePoint has a multi-purpose design that allows for management, scaling, provisioning of broad, broad variety of business applications. It kind of more commonly is used for intranet portals, extranets, websites, also used for document and file management. And sorry, I thought I disconnected. Collaborative spaces, social tools, enterprise search, and also for hosting business intelligence applications. In 2008, the Gartner Group put SharePoint as leaders in the quadrants of its 3 magic quadrants for search, portals, and enterprise content management. SharePoint also happens to be used by approximately 78% of the Fortune 500 companies. And also between 2006 and 2011, Microsoft has sold over 36.5 million user licenses. So that's fairly impressive, and it just goes to show that it is actually quite a popular platform. Cool. Things we're going to be covering pretty much why. Why do we need to know how to set up SQL in a specific way or have things set up in a specific manner for SharePoint? Certain things to consider when we are setting up the SQL farm. We will go over some storage requirements, some farm considerations specifically around storage, placement of databases, etc. We will also, as I mentioned before, cover stuff on SharePoint resource-intensive tasks, service applications to watch out for, databases to keep an eye out on, and search. Finally, some maintenance plans that I normally recommend to be set up on all your SharePoint and SQL farms. If we have time, I've also got another slide which has a bit of information on database sizings, but we will see how we move along. Why is the SQL Server performance important to SharePoint? Pretty much all the information is stored on SQL. Yes, fine, there is a fair amount of information that is also stored on the web front end or the application servers, such as the search indexes, but pretty much the bulk of the information is stored on SQL. So the SQL Server performance is the, I suppose you could say, it's the lifeblood of SharePoint. And frequently, a lot of companies, they don't specify the they don't spec the service properly. If the farm, for example, if your farm is at capacity, disk IO, RAM, network usage is at capacity, certain normal tasks are going to take a lot longer to do, such as running your backups, etc. You wouldn't want, for example, your backups to run over the allocated time into production times. Yeah. Cool. Things to consider when setting up your SQL farm. So basically, in this diagram, I have put a fairly generic setup of SharePoint, so you can have your number of web front-end servers, any sort of number depending on the size of your farm. You also can have your application servers as well, all of which need to connect to SQL. So, without getting into too much detail, I put SQL as the big gray blob. So basically, the stuff to need to be aware of for your SQL configuration is RAM. We obviously need to have a lot of RAM. SQL will take up as much memory as it needs and as much memory as you are able to give it. Obviously, there are settings you can enter for that. Also, the CPU. We also need to be aware of the local disk config. The second thing to be aware of is the HBA settings. So it would be your host bus adapters. There are a number of two that potentially could be used, and they all offer different pros and cons and speeds. Most common is a fiber. You connect to a fiber backbone. You're also able to use SCSI and also combined network, depending on how fancy the environment you guys are lucky to have. The third thing to keep to keep in mind is your disk array connectivity. So this will be how you are connecting to each LUN. A LUN is your logical unit number, which is referring to a SAN, to your storage area network. And it also is related to the type of your HBA, your host bus adapter that you have. The fourth item we also need to be aware of is your disk configuration. Obviously, the more spindles that we have, the greater the I/O that that particular LUN will be able to provide. So the more spindles, the better performance, because we are spreading the IOPS around over the spindles. You also want to make sure that the SAN can respond to your both read and write requests within normally about 20 milliseconds. Ideally, a lot of people recommend ideally you should have around 10 milliseconds. It's also better to have a combination of smaller, faster disks and more of them running together as part of your LUN, as opposed to fewer larger disks, because you are spreading. There's less drives for the read writes to be spread over. Also, something to be aware of is using what type of RAID you select, whether you're going to be using RAID 10 or RAID 5. Basically, the benefits of using RAID 10, it's considerably faster. It's roughly around 4 times faster at reading and approximately twice as fast for writes. Yet again, it does depend on the environment that you have set up. The fifth thing to consider is database placement. Where should we put these databases? Obviously, you don't want to go and put all your databases sitting in a single LUN. So by putting the databases on separate LUNs, it allows for more concurrent connections. Each logical drive, has a number of connections that it can have. It's, that you can't have an infinite number of connections to any given resource. There will be a bottleneck at some point. So by splitting these items out, so your TempDB log, transactional logs, content databases, etc., by splitting them out over multiple LUNs, we are spreading the load far more evenly over the environment. Also, I've gone and put in backups there, and I've popped it in as a different color. If, for instance, you don't happen to have a backup program that does online backups, so you have a backup program that connects to SQL directly, and it reads the data out of the databases directly live from SQL. That's one option. If you don't have an online backup program, you would have a SQL maintenance plan that will go and run depending on your requirements. We'll touch on maintenance plans a bit later.